And we need to adopt the idea or the belief that the most effective way to escape our problems is to solve them. Okay, so we're going to move on to action. Now this is important, the abreactive threshold, that's a strange one, isn't it? You know, and what I'm saying by that is that most people who drink initially, they don't drink destructively. It takes a while to get there. I got there very early in life, and lots of people like me get there in early life. But initially, they drink somewhat normally. You know, might be heavily, but somewhat normally. But there comes a point when they reach this threshold, whereby there's seemingly no going back. Once people cross this threshold, I've never known anybody, and I'm talking about thousands of people I've met all over the world with alcoholism. I've never known anybody when they've reached these depths to reverse it. I've been to many funerals of people who have died trying. But there's such a good life out there without alcoholism, and you can feel it in ways, you know, you can produce chemicals in your body without alcoholism that'll make you feel fantastic, blissful even, which through methods that we'll describe later on. So the abreactive threshold, what are we talking about here? People often say I've crossed the line into alcoholism. What is this invisible line? What are they talking about? It's the point at which alcohol stops concealing problems and exacerbates them. That's what we're talking about. Okay. So prior to reaching the abreactive threshold, alcohol does mask our problems in the ways we described earlier on. It affects the frontal lobes of our brain, it affects our memory. We don't care and we can't remember. Problem solved. Path of least resistance to pleasure. Displeasure alleviated. Problem is, with people like myself, that normally ends up in hospitalisations, no friends, no job, no home, no dignity. And that is an option to anyone. Here with the Alcoholic to Alchemist philosophy for optimal living, we're not trying to coerce people into a way of being. We're offering a choice. There will ultimately be people out there who don't agree with certain aspects of the philosophy. We're not trying to coerce them into believing that. It's their choice. We just know that this philosophy works for lots of people. And not just alcoholism, in any walk of life. So what we're saying is, prior to the abreactive threshold, alcohol masks our problems. Okay. After crossing the threshold, alcohol emphasises our problems. The feelings of liberation, omnipotence, ecstasy and euphoria that we once got through imbibing alcohol, no more. People go back time and time again chasing them feelings. I was one of them. But they're never going to come anymore. You know, once we can accept, yes, I have crossed the abreactive threshold. Therefore, when I imbibe alcohol from this day forth, I am going to have an abreaction that's going to be deleterious or detrimental to my life. It's going to be life-defeating or self-defeating action if I take. And once we can accept that fully, that's when we move on. And what step 2 is about is simply accepting that, yes, I've reached and I've compromised the abreactive threshold. Therefore, I admit totally that every time, or I'm aware totally, I am that if I drink, I'm going to have an abreaction. That is going to be self-defeating. That's all we've got to say. The phenomenon again is very similar to analogy. If I use what the example I used before, a person with a nut allergy has to accept fully that if they're to eat nuts, the chances are they're going to have anaphylactic shock, and that, you know, they're compromising their life. That's all we need to do with step 2, is just recognise that if we want to carry on drinking, although we know abreact, we've just got to know that there is no life out there for us. You know, a person with a nut allergy who eats nuts is likely going to die at some point through anaphylactic shock. The same thing with alcoholism. A person who continues to drink, and again I know this through personal experience from many and many and many and many people close to me who have died through alcoholism, they knew that they crossed the abreactive threshold. They knew that they would abreact in one way or another when they drank, but they chose to carry on. And it does become a choice. It doesn't feel like a choice initially, and I'll explain why that is later on. Okay, so really what it's like, in a sense, is prior to the abreactive threshold, if we can envisage a dam, and a dam holds back water. Let's say that alcohol is that dam, and what it does, it holds back all our emotional and mental debris. All our unresolved issues are held back by alcoholism, held back in our unconscious mind so that we're not conscious of them, and if we feel free and liberated. When we compromise the abreactive threshold, what it's like is that dam of alcohol comes down, and the polluted contents of our mind come through from the unconscious mind to the conscious mind with the might of a tsunami. They come through, and all of these issues hit us full on, and then we're in trouble basically, because alcohol no longer works. We've got all of these issues swimming around in our heads, and many people at that point obviously hit severe depression, suicide and whatever. But there is a path, and there's lots of people out there taking that path, and this program is training people like yourselves and mentors to go out there and train other people, to give them the tools, not just to give up drinking, because that's not enough. A person who just gives up drinking per se will probably revert back to it if they don't do something with their life. We want to give these people the tools to reach their optimal potential. You think of it this way: if alcoholism is a mechanism of escape, right? If we've got nothing, if we've got a life that we adore, we get up of a morning, like I do nearly every morning, and really embrace life, why would I want to escape? And there is a passage in the book that I call Escaping into the Magic, because where I escape to is the creative domain of my mind. And I can do that without alcohol. And I go there umpteen times a day. So we don't need alcohol to escape our problems. And when we resolve our problems, you know, initially we don't have anything we want to escape from. So the first part of the program is about identifying them things from which we seek escape and resolving them. Okay. So if you've got this idea that the abreactive threshold is, if you can envisage alcohol as a dam that's holding back all the contents of our polluted mind out of our conscious mind, we haven't got rid of them. They're there, they're active, they're still impacting on us. Our unconscious mind impacts on us all the time. But when we reach the abreactive threshold, instead of alcoholism keeping back that stuff in our unconscious mind, it collapses and everything comes flooding through to consciousness. And then fears, guilt, everything seems to hit us at once. And first of all, we need to know what we're up against. We need to become aware of the mechanisms that are going on. So this is the abreactive threshold being compromised. When we do compromise the abreactive threshold, and we do cross that line, so to speak, then the contents of our mind work in all strange ways. We become driven by the persecutory tactics of our turbulent minds, and we lose control. We have all of these issues that for years we've we've suppressed with alcoholism, and all of a sudden they come through to our conscious mind, and we're persecuted. People again who've experienced alcoholism will know exactly what I'm talking about. That persecution is horrible, it's relentless, it's 24 hours a day, and basically we have to be extremely strong to not relapse and go back to alcohol. And really, with a lot of people, when the pain gets so great and they fully accept that alcohol isn't the answer to the problem anymore, then that's when people will normally move on. What we must realise that once we've compromised the abreactive threshold, once we've crossed that invisible line, all subsequent bouts of drinking will end up in abreaction. They'll lead to an abreaction. Abreactions manifest, and again people watching this will identify, severe mood swings, paranoia, intense guilt, remorse, suicidal tendencies. All of these are extremely common. Okay, so it sounds like we're up the creek without a paddle at step 2. We're not. We've just actually, what we've done, we've identified and we've become aware of the mechanisms that are driving our alcoholism. And the first stage in combating anything is to be aware of what's going on within us. Okay, so the conclusion of this. The abreactive threshold is a phenomenon whereby alcohol ceases to contain your mental pollution, and it comes flooding from the unconscious to the conscious with the might of a tsunami. Once compromised, there is no reverse engineering. The invisible line has been crossed, and you and drink remain incompatible for life. Again, I'm not trying to force that belief onto anybody. What I'm trying to do is to save people out there going out and putting it to task, putting it to test. When we know we abreact to alcohol, to continue drinking is insanity, really. But I was one of them people who wouldn't take the advice of, and I had to put it to task. And I found out the hard way, and I found out years later, after having really successful periods away from drink, to going back to the devastation. So I don't make that statement saying us and alcohol are incompatible for life. I don't make it lightly. I make it through experience of thousands upon thousands of people. Okay, which brings us to step 3. At that point, I think we'll have another show